All right. Good to see you again, Kenny. How are you?
I'm very well, Sam. How are you?
Yeah, very good. Very good. And it's been quite a while. I mean, other than us catching up briefly in January at a networking event, it had been years prior to that. It had been since 2016, 2017. We were both on the same course, mentorship, and then further courses beyond that. But curious to hear in brief what you've been up to since 2016.
Well, since 2016. Well, not to forget the week or the 5 days we spent with each other in between then. Down at Peterborough.
Never forget those 5
Never
days.
forget that. Yep. You were getting up first thing in the morning to go for your run, and I was still in my bed. but never mind. So what have I been up to? Well, I've still got the architecture practice. So in my day-to-day job, if you like, as a professional, I'm still running the architecture practice. So it's busy, so that's quite good. But we obviously came together in terms of our interest in property. So really, I've just been working on 3 or 4 property developments. I've got, they all focus on new build housing. So some of those sites have completed. Some of them are still on the go, and we're working our way through this COVID-19 situation. Don't know if you mentioned that or not, but it's the times we're in. The sites are closed, so we're just keen to get them opened again. I was part of a service accommodation business, which essentially had nothing to do with. That was my wife's business. So I resigned as a director and a shareholder in that company, and Sandra now runs our service accommodation business, which is really quite busy, even just now. And I'm now kind of dabbling in or expanding on the kind of property mentoring, more on the development side though. Not so much encompassing every type of development or strategy there is, but really just trying to help people when they get into the development side of property, and how they can put structures and processes and procedures in place to try and make it a successful development. So that's been me, really. Still doing a lot of kind of social media and a bit of networking as well. So quite enjoying it, to be honest with you. What about you?
Well, for me, since 2016, obviously at that point when we were both going through mentorship, I was there because I'd hit a plateau in what I thought I knew, what I'd achieved in terms of had a okay property portfolio, but realized it was taking so long to get there that I thought if I keep going at this pace, I'll be at it forever and won't reach the kind of lofty, ambitious goals that I'm striving for, which is why I sought out mentorship and attending other courses. So since then, after being a bit overwhelmed with all these different wonderful courses available, Chris, obviously, who you know well too, business partner Chris, we settled on service accommodation, and when we did focus on it, then we started to get off the ground and have some successes, which was great. Set up an SA rent-to-rent business in Edinburgh. Thought we couldn't go wrong there. But I look back at that now as the business that failed. But we learned a lot from it and pivoted, and then set up a reincarnation of the SA business, following a different model, following a different approach, different customer base completely. And we've made a good success of it, and we've grown a nice little business of SA units, probably our own, some bought, some rent to rent, and then manage a few properties for investors who are hands off just locally. We don't go outside of our immediate area. And so that's been really great, growing that over the last 4 years and understanding how the inner workings of that happen. Hired a member of staff, so support someone who supports their family, which is really cool. And then beyond that, now obviously Chris and I, he's always still had his building practice, his building development company, running projects for private clients, as in residential, large scale, high-end extensions for private clients in East Lothian, that kind of thing. Yep. And he's done a couple of full overhauls on properties for us, which has been cool. Having that in-house makes for a great business partnership, having that. Yeah. And now Chris and I are obviously focusing on optimizing our business, in SA, but adding assets to our portfolio that will diversify the types of income. We're adding residential assets, we're adding commercial, and getting more excited about expanding in that space of commercial as well. And then, of course, the other aspect that takes up a lot of our time that we really enjoy, though, is mentoring through mastermind groups, which has increasingly become a large part of things over the last 2 to 3 years. That kind of brings us up to speed.
Okay, I want to tap into your mastermind thing, but before we go there, something you mentioned there was quite interesting, because when we first got involved all those years ago, it does seem like a long time ago, but it was only 4 years ago. One of the things that was always talked to us, or the phrase was the gold mine area. Yeah, and you've just mentioned there about how you're kind of working in your local area through East Lothian. How big a factor is that for you? I mean, would you diversify and go a wee bit further afield, or are you quite happy just where you are and sitting tight with the models and what you know?
Area-wise, I mean, I personally own property all up and down England and Scotland, because that was on the long-term residential let stuff, whether it's HMOs or single lets. And the earlier part of investing, I guess I wasn't overly astute with it. It was more a case of doing deals that were good enough in terms of the returns, and putting faith in the partners and agents I was working with, because all that stuff, I don't manage it. It's all managed by an agent fully. I've never managed my own single lets. For the serviced accommodation, I wouldn't ever begin to try and manage properties outside of our area, where we know, first of all, most importantly, who our customers are and where they come from, and how to service them and their needs, deliver what they require, and develop more clients like that, and then have the team to deliver that service, where we've got the maintenance and the cleaning and operations set up for all that, because it's a really, as you'll know, operation heavy type business. So I'd never go outside of our area to do that and try to manage properties out with our immediate little, as you put it, goldmine area. But to do the same strategy elsewhere, it wouldn't stop me at all, so long as I understood the demand side of things, like who the customers are, where they're coming from, and had full confidence and faith of who would look after it for me. So therefore, I would happily hold and invest in property in your neck of the woods, where I would know and trust Sandra to look after property for me, and it'd be hands off. And I could do another strategy, another part of the country for other people to manage, so long as I understood the fundamentals of the area, where I understood the local economy, the values of the property, so I'm not buying a dud, that kind of thing. So yeah, when it comes to choosing different areas to invest in, I'm not saying I'd invest willy-nilly everywhere. There's got to be real reasons why, but it wouldn't stop me from going outside of this area. Just for our little business, I wouldn't try to expand what we're doing outside into the next region, even if it's 20 miles away, if that makes sense.
Yeah. No.
How about you? What's your take on that?
It's kind of similar, I think, is the honest answer. I mean, I don't do anything at all actually in the service accommodation business, but I do always get questions and queries, sent to me. One today was, would Sandra, my wife, look at a property in Dumfries? And I never actually went back and asked her, because I just said no, she wouldn't, because I mean, I've got every single faith that she could. She could essentially fill it, in terms of getting corporate bookings in there or whatever. But the whole thing is, as you say, is knowing when you've got the phone call at 2 o'clock in the morning because, someone's been sick in a bed, for example. Who do you get to go and change that? Who do you trust to get up at that time in the morning to go take clean linen to the SA and strip beds? And it's one of those things that you really want this stuff on your doorstep. And Sandra just now is running something like 60, I think it's 60-ish properties, and if you average that at say four, that's 240 beds, at any one time that's getting managed. So you really want to keep that as a tight ship. You don't want to be going all over the place and relying on people you don't know. So I think I'm kind of singing from the same hymn sheet in that one, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
And my concern though is looking, I don't know how you feel this, but looking at the SA market, and I'm a big believer still in education, not just in property, but I mean, I guess you would understand that as an architect, I've went through 7 years of training at university, and then I came out of university and actually looking back, get taught nothing, because all my learning is practical in terms of being in the office. So I'm a great believer in education. I've always paid for my education. I'm not a believer in getting education for free. I'm not a believer in what's the word? You can look it up online. You could look up online how to become a doctor, but you wouldn't go out and say, "Well, I'm a doctor because I've done a course on Google."
I heard a great thing along to that very point, Kenny. Someone had said that really, in theory, everyone in the world could be a millionaire and have six-pack abs because there's information out there on YouTube. But the fact is, they don't, because you pay attention to what you pay for.
Mm-hmm.
And so all this free information out there that the world doesn't use or make the most of, there'll be the very, very few who are so driven and motivated that will seek out this information and put it in some kind of order and organize it for them to be able to make the most of. But I totally get what you're saying. I totally agree. I'm there as well.
Yeah. Good.
And course-wise, education-wise, is this something that you are now involved with too?
Well, when you and I met, when I first got involved in going to property courses, if you like, and I always tell people I was professionally depressed. And you'll maybe remember this story from some of the courses we were on together, but the last recession, 2008, I basically took my architecture business through a deep, dark recession, and I believe it took 7 years to get it back out of that recession. I just, it's a small local practice. I don't rely on big, international projects and all that. So the economy, it had a long-standing effect, and that had an effect on me because I was busy being an architect and doing what I do, but I couldn't see a way to grow the practice. Or I had a wall in front of me that I just thought, well, maybe I didn't want to. I've never kind of worked it out, but I knew that I couldn't be involved in forever, never, ever. Anyway, doing just doing drawings, because that's a retail business. It's like a shop. Every time you get a set of drawings, you do the drawings, and then you're out marketing for the next customer. So I was looking for a way to get bigger chunks of money, and I felt I wanted to get into development. But the big thing, being professionally depressed, was how do I find the land? Yeah, and I look back now thinking, why was I even asking that question? But how do I find the land and how do I find the money? And that was when I actually took the step to go and get in and amongst people who were trying to be developers, and that's where you and I met. I can't quite. Why did you? I mean, you had a portfolio. You and Chris had quite a strong portfolio even back then.
Well, I mean, it was me personally. I'd built that up since 2006, 2007, but it was very, very slow progress, slow and steady, but it was slow progress, and I was on my own doing it. My wife, bless her, she supported me through it, but wasn't interested in it. Obviously, she's interested now in the results it brings, but I was very much on a lonely journey. Wasn't in a group, a community. I'd been on a few courses back in 2007 and 8, but that was down in London, and come back up here, and I'd be all my own implementing this stuff because I'm an action taker. I'd learned stuff and I'd go put it into action. I'd just be very slow at doing it. And so I got to a point where I had become financially free. I left my job in 2014. I built a software business because I wanted to do the entrepreneurial thing, but realized that wasn't my true calling. That wasn't for me. And then it was go back to property that I know much more about it. I get it. I know how to make it work, and I do enjoy it. And that's when I was seeking out mentorship, because I felt like I just hit a complete ceiling. I knew enough to get to where I got to with a couple of small commercial conversions to make some flats out of a commercial building, buying and refinancing property, recycling a bit of money where I can, started doing a couple of JVs like with family members. So I'd got into an all right position with it, but it was a case of, this is going to take me ages if I keep going the pace I'm going, which is why I thought I'm happy to pay to go faster.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why we were both on the same course at the same time.
Yeah.
So I had asked before we started chatting, Kenny, I'd let people know on Facebook that I'm chatting to you today, that we're catching up after quite a few years, which I'm glad we are. And I thought it'd be fun to ask people out there who are interested in the kind of stuff that you and I might talk about, what would be their biggest questions to an architect developer? And I've got a handful of questions come back. So if it's cool with you, I will literally read some of these questions out, and your answers to these, I'm sure, will be really helpful to the people who've answered the questions and many others, I think.
Okay, fantastic.
So, the first one I've got is from Andy, and he has asked, when it comes to initial design, how much does a developer rely on the architect?
I would probably say too much. Is my honest answer to that one. But I would say it probably depends very much on the experience of the developer. So in their Block Architects, which is my architecture business, was set up in 2004, and even beyond, before that, I was in private practice as an employee. It's never ceased to amaze me the number of developers who come to the fore who know not enough about their business or their business model. Yeah, they tend to rely too much on the architect to know about the business. So architects don't necessarily know about the business. So, for example, someone comes, say, a pub, yeah. The architect, unless the architect is niching and doing pubs all the time, the chances are is that they don't know the specifics of the business. They may know that you need, X number of covers, you need toilets, you need the bar, you need the bar store. But in terms of sizing that and working out, the profitability of each seat in that location with a floor area of a certain floor area, that's the type of information that I think the architect needs to go back and ask the client. So when you've got an experienced client, they will know those figures. When you've got a client who's looking at coming into that marketplace for the first time, or whether it's a pub or whether it's a shop or whatever, when they're coming into that marketplace for the first time, they probably don't have enough business or knowledge of the business model to answer the questions. So I think any architect working at the front end of that project, the client and the architect should really work hard together before you even draw anything, just to hone in on what is the business plan and how does that affect the building design.
That's a key part to it, isn't it? It's absolutely not a transactional thing of, can you make a drawing for this building to optimize it? It runs much deeper than that, doesn't it?
I think it does, but I think you've got to contrast that with the conflict of the developer is that he or she wants a fixed cost. They want a transactional figure, so they want you to turn and say, well, it's £10,000 or whatever it is to design the building, but then they want all the other advice and support. That's something that you've maybe not necessarily included in your fee. So architects, professionals we work with an RIS appointment document, which quite clearly goes through various stages of a project.
RIS, do you want to unravel the acronym?
Sorry?
You want to unravel the acronym when you said the RIS?
Right, the RIS is the Royal Institute of Architects in Scotland. So they've got a kind of standard fee appointment document, which has got a scope of works, as we call it. And through that, there's various degrees of service that the architect can provide, and it's up to the architect to present that to the client at the start of the project to say, we will provide X, Y, and Z for this fee. So again, I think it's very important at the start of the project that the developer and the architect have a clear understanding of what is required and what is being provided. Yeah. And that avoids conflicts such as, you've asked your architect, for example, to get you to the building control stage or get your building warrant. Then the contractor starts on site and there's information missing from the drawing package or the specification package. Well, of course there is, because depending on the size of the project and the complexity of the project, all of that information isn't required to get a building warrant. So that's when sometimes you can get a conflict of the developer who thinks that the architect should have included that information, but the reality is that it's never been asked for, it was never included in the fee proposal. So as a developer, you need to understand the degrees, the varying degrees of service that you can get from the architect, and you need to understand what you've actually paid the architect to do.
And ultimately what it comes down to then is both parties being very good at communicating, asking the right kind of questions, and figuring out how to make life as easy as possible for each other.
Absolutely. I think the quality of the questions is important. I think I'm maybe not meaning so much on some small domestic projects like extensions and stuff, but maybe not even a house. But when you get to doing bigger projects of scale, I think it's very important that this thing about sending an email, that needs to kind of stop. Yeah, you need to have face-to-face meetings at the start of the project, whether that's Zoom, because this is a new technology that's come in for most of us, although I did kind of use it. But these types of meetings on Zoom or back to face-to-face meetings, and actually sitting down for a few hours and penning things down and writing things and talking and chatting, that very quickly will emerge into a brief, a document that can be documented, typed up, and then edited as the brief evolves, as things evolve when you go through the design process. Because it is a process. It's not A, B, and C, and all of a sudden you have to deliver A, B, and C, because some things happen. Things come in at the side that nobody could see, and all of a sudden something in the brief has to change.
So would you say, Kenny, then it's up to the architect, being a great architect and project manager of that process you described, to artfully lead the developer along that process to get to the point that you're able to work with them and this project effectively? Is that kind of what you're saying, that you will guide that process to get to a point where you can come up with the initial design?
Yeah, I think that's correct. I think when it's an inexperienced client stroke developer, then that's probably the role of the architect. If there's a project manager sitting between the architect and the developer, then that's probably the project manager's role to develop and define the brief and then provide that to the architect. The architect is then responsible, is the lead consultant, if you like, to the design team. So the architect's then responsible for coordinating the design team drawings and information and making sure that all the other design team members are working to the brief. So your design team could then include, for example, structural engineers, interior designers, lighting designers, health and safety. There's different professions involved in design teams. So the architect would typically go lead consultant then in making sure that all that technical information is being coordinated in accordance with the brief. And then when you talk about, probably there's a financial thing then. How do you hit the financial targets all off it in terms of maybe construction costs? Because it's, if a client came back to me 5 years later and said, you designed this building and it's not making the profits that it's supposed to, well, put the price of a pint up then, mate, because things have changed over the last 5 years. But if it's actually in terms of construction costs and program and all that kind of stuff, then that is something that unfortunately is variable throughout until you give the client the key. It's just something that's variable all the way through. I mean, we are sitting here just now in the COVID-19 situation, and for most clients out there who've entered a proper contract, we're into this thing called force majeure. It's an act of God. So some costs will have to be paid by the client to the contractors, etc., etc. It should be clear cut, but there will be some fights coming out of this. Is that the architect's fault? Probably not. Is it the project manager's fault? Probably not. Is it the contractor's fault? Probably not. But who's going to pay for it? Well, to some extent, it might be the client who's paying for some of the costs, security or what have you,
Yeah.
So.
Okay. I've got some kind of secondary questions from same chap, Andy, which follow on from that first one, which hopefully are straightforward to capture. He's asking, what is the responsibility line to maximize GDV? So he's got 3 points: to maximize GDV, to maximize profit, and to drive final design. And I guess what he's asking is the responsibility split between the developer and the architect. So how is that responsibility weighted, I guess, shared between developer and architect when it comes to maximizing the GDV?
I think again, I've got to go back to the developer and say that I think the developer needs to have a very strong case up front of what the profitability needs to be. So if it was a housing development, for example, the developer comes in. If it's an experienced developer, he will know, or she will know, look, it's a £5 million GDV. I'm going to put X number of houses on that site. I know I can roughly get that in because I know my density per acre. I've done this before, so I know roughly my build costs, or certainly I know my build costs for my last project that I did, which was maybe same size. So that developer would then have a good indication and present a good case to the architect as to what is likely to happen. Thereafter, the architect would probably need to think about, well, in order to achieve that, I'm designing, straightforward vanilla type housing, or the site demands, city centre site demands something of higher excellence in terms of architecture. The developer understands that it's going to be more expensive to build, but the NGDV is going to be higher. And then there's so many variables, I think, about where that question is going. And then I guess it all comes down to the relationship. It's a trust relationship between the developer and the architect. A lot of developers will use the same architect over and over and over because it takes time to form relationships and get to know each other's brains in terms of, so
makes sense.
If you're appointing an architect based only on fees, the transactional value, I've done a development with that architect, that's fine, got a good result, moving to the next development, I could save money, so I'm going to go and try and get quotes from 3 architects. Well, okay, you could probably do that, but why not just sit down with an architect and chat about the fees, because you like him or her, they've given you a good job in the past, they're starting to know how you work, you're starting to know how they work. Surely that's the win-win situation. Why are you trying to save, probably in terms of the overall project cost, a relatively insignificant amount of money by shopping around?
Cool. I hope that is going to satisfy the question that Andy had. It's a very there's no black and white question like that, but it, I guess, will inform the kind of relationship that a developer can strive for with their architect. And I've got questions later on to come to actually about how to identify, qualify, and select an architect to work with. But the next one is from Mike, and he said that probably one of the biggest hurdles to jump in getting into house building is where to find the land and how do you calculate how much it is worth. He said then vendors and agents typically always think it's worth a lot more than it is. So when people go into Rightmove and see land with outline planning or planning permission for sale, it's typically going to be way more than what the developer would want to spend on it. So the questions were, really pointing to where do you find the land and how do you calculate how much that land is worth.
Right. Where do you find the land? Let's tackle that part of the question first. There's actually various ways to find land. I guess it kind of is hard work. I mean, there's people out there, educators, mentors, call it what you want, who look at site plans all day long, you know, and say, oh, there's they'll look at the local plan, which is a document that the council have that says this piece of land is zoned for residential, it's zoned for commercial, it's zoned for hospitality, retail, whatever it's zoned for. And depending on the strategy that you're going for, these are the zones you would look for in local plans and see if you can try and find pockets of land that are still to be developed, etc., etc. And that's all kind of fine and academic. I'm more of a believer of it's about relationships and who you know. So I'm a big B&I guy. You know, I like my B&I. We meet every Friday morning and we go to that. And I'm always asking, not just for myself, but also for the clients that I've got. I tend to focus on new built housing as a developer. That's my interest. But I've got architecture clients who want to do retail. I've got architecture clients who want to do flatted developments, etc., etc. So when I'm at B&I, I'm always asking for, when you're out and about, if you see a piece of land or a building with a for sale sign on it, send me a picture. And I get loads of referrals like that, where I'll then do a phone call and find out what I can about the land or the building. So that's one good way. But it is networking, speaking to estate agents, forming these relationships with them. The developments that I've procured over the last 4 years, let me think. The first one was through the estate agent. So it was I built a self-built house, and I told the agent this was me starting the development for myself, fed up doing it for everybody else. Well, I still do it. I'm not fed up doing it, you know, I still do it. But so she said to me, well, why don't you look at this piece of land here then? And it was 4 plots just along the road that she was selling for the same landowner, and that got me started. So that was just a conversation, just telling people I was interested. The second site that we looked at was an architecture client of mine who I actually got planning permission and building warrants for it back at the last recession, and the site had sat there empty. And when I mentioned to him I was interested in doing development, he says, why don't you take some plots up there? And that's what happened. The third site was a casual conversation, having driven past it, saying that sat there for a long time. You know, I wonder who owns that. And then I don't know if they call this, what is it, The Secret? You know, law of attraction.
Yeah.
4 weeks later, the landowner, I can't remember how they got in contact with us, but the landowner got in contact us through an agent, and lo and behold, it was that site, and that, you know. So how do you find the land? I don't think it's easy. It is hard work, but you've got to get yourself out there and put your name about and make sure you're speaking to solicitors. Solicitors are another good one. There's a lot of solicitors out there who've got clients who own land or buildings. Yeah, so that's another good one. Get to know solicitors and just ask the question: do you know of anyone who's selling a building? Do you know of anyone who's selling a piece of land?
And do you tend to look for land that already has plan?
You and Chris are working on a commercial project in Kirlook just now, yeah?
Yeah.
How did you find that one?
Through a commercial surveyor.
Mm-hmm.
So we were actively, we'd asked them for premises that could fit a potential client that we were like a commercial tenant, a potential future tenant that we were targeting to work with. We were looking to essentially play Cupid and matchmake in advance, and then get the vacant commercial and get them in place. And so it came through asking us questions through commercial surveyors. So yeah, I guess the same principle would apply. Making friends with commercial surveyors.
Yeah. Well, can I ask you then, take it a bit further? I'm working just now on a development appraisal for a developer from England who has bought a property in Scotland from an auction site. Yeah. Okay. have you ever done that? Have you got a view on that? Are you buying?
Buying a development site from auction.
Yeah.
Um, I've only ever bid on a couple of straightforward houses and flats at auction and haven't won the bids. I was all prepared and ready to do this. This was like through Future Auction a few years back, around 2016 when Chris and I were getting started. So I haven't gone through the whole transaction. From a development site point of view, where's the main question pointing to? Is it on the process of buying at auction, or is it from the actual what it is you're buying, the development
Well,
site?
the trust factor is do you have any concerns about buying from auction? I personally don't like it, buying from auction. I think a lot of the sites that go to auction have underlying issues, and unless you're really experienced, I'm not saying they're not all developable by any manner of means, because most of them are
Yeah.
at a cost, but unless you've got a degree of experience or you've employed someone to go out and assess the site before you bid for it, I guess there's a degree of risk,
There is. I mean, I'm generally pretty risk averse in investing our and investors' money. It's just the sensible thing to do to de-risk anything as much as possible. And the challenge, I think, with auction property is that it can look cheap on the surface. And so people can, if they have some cash, can go shopping for so-called cheap property. But unless you know something, and unless you've got some kind of competitive advantage that the next auction bidder doesn't have based on the knowledge of the area and the exits of what to do with the property, that's where the risk comes up.
Yeah.
So you de-risk it by having that diligence done, or by virtue of what you know and who you know. You think, right, well, there's an opportunity. So if it's on your doorstep and you know exactly what to do with it, repurpose this for 4 SA flats because Sandra will run them and optimize them, that's your competitive advantage. But for someone else outside of your area looking at it, their only view in it is that looks cheap. It's a lot of bricks and space for that price. But if they don't know how to capture and monetize the opportunity, then the downside might be that, well, it's not optimized and it becomes a liability and the head's underwater. And so it comes down to really knowing what you plan to do with it and having done the diligence. But I mean, I can't speak to the question from a huge amount of past experience, but I think there could be great opportunities found. There's lots of people who are finding great opportunities right now. Have you ever heard of an information website called EIG? The Essential Information Group. It's a really powerful tool. What this website does, it's a subscription-based tool, so it'd be fairly expensive. I can't remember if it's over £100 a month or less than that, but it'd be several £100s for the year anyway. And what this tool does is aggregate all of the UK auction lots into a database that you can search by area. So if you wanted to look at everything that's for sale coming up in your postcode in Scotland, you could do that if there were lots available. You could look up a selection of commercial stuff, land, I guess. And so it can really accelerate the route to finding. So maybe in answer to one of Mike's questions, that could be another way to be finding the land. But if you're looking for properties developed, you can find a lot quite quickly. It's then knowing how to do the diligence on it and what looks underpriced and what looks overpriced, because it's true what you said, that many times things go to auction for a reason, struggling to sell elsewhere. But if the investor has got the diligent approach of how to actually break that down into understanding what the opportunity is, there can be some cracking opportunities out there.
Yeah.
It's just knowing how to filter out the ones that are going to be the duds and focus in on the ones that are real opportunities.
And that then goes back to the question, how do you put a value on that? So, I mean, whenever I'm doing I do the kind of due diligence and the cost appraisals, and I really start from the end and try and work back the way. Yeah. So in fact, I was doing one earlier today for this site. So I am looking at what can the maximum GDV be. I'm working out all of the costs that I know, budgetary figures, of course, and I'm trying to build in a 25% profit margin because I know that most banks, well, say more pre-COVID, most banks would lend, so long as you were hitting a kind of 25% profit margin because you're starting to de-risk it, and should things go astray for whatever reason on sites, you've got that little bit of buffer, before you're into negative equity. So that's what I would do. Now, years and years ago, when I was a young architect, there used to be a rule of thumb that it was a third profits, it was a third cost, a construction cost, a build cost.
I was going to say that.
Yeah, and a third for the land value, and that now is just completely out of the park. It just doesn't exist. Yeah. But unfortunately, a lot of these landowners, I mean, I've dealt with landowners who are inexperienced and they still hang around with this a third in their head. If you're speaking to experienced developers who've built in the past, perhaps, and are still holding assets, they've got a much more realistic idea of what they could sell the land for. Of course, they're always going to try and get a wee bit more out of you. That's the nature of business. But in my appraisals just now, land values can be sitting at anywhere between kind of 7 and maybe 10%, maybe 12% of a push of the total GDV. And
that's what they should be at, you're saying, or is that the way it works out?
Well, where I am, I'm not saying that's the way it is across the country, but where we're developing and what we're looking at, the type of model we're looking at, which is new built housing, in and around kind of Lanarkshire area, that's the kind of land values that are starting to pop out. Now, if it's so, let's look at it. Say it was a one-off house at say £200,000 was the end value. You're maybe looking to pay, as a developer, £15,000-20,000 for the plot. But if you're buying that plot because it's your forever home and you want to live in it, you're going to that's not so much of an issue.
So you're saying 7 to 10%?
7 to 10, maybe 12 at a push.
So to summarize then for those watching this, what you're saying is you're working backwards from the outcome that you're looking at, and you'll take, I guess, a conservative comparable of what other houses are in the area, and add a degree of weighting for it being a new and a premium to it. Maybe on that point, what kind of premium would you add to, let's say you've got comparables for other 3-bed houses that have been built 5 or even 50 years ago, but they're 3-bed houses in a similar area. You think, right, we're making a brand new product. It's going to be a similar size footprint. Well, you'll see those values. How much would you add to it, or would you base it on those values?
Well, good question. I've just done an exercise literally this morning before we spoke. So I'm looking at a site just now. I won't mention the place, but it's central to us. It's in Scotland. And I don't go back like 40, 50-year properties. I try and find properties that are relatively modern flats.
Yep.
Maybe something that looks as if it's maybe anywhere between brand new to maybe 10, 15 years old. And those properties need a little bit of work done to them. The ones I've found, need kitchens and bathrooms. They're a bit tired, but they're on the market just now for offers over 100 grand. So right now, I'm looking at roughly 120 for a new build.
Okay, that's the end value.
Yeah, that's my starting point just now. Yeah.
Then you go down to the next stage if you think, right, what's the build cost going to be?
Yeah.
And in that, will you include all professional fees, all the groundworks, everything to, okay. And so what figure do you tend to work to? Is it per square meter? How per square meter?
In terms of construction costs right now, I'm working at a kind of square meter rate. Yeah, and that's going to have to vary from site to site because there are normals and different building types and all that kind of stuff. So at a very early due diligence stage when you're trying to find your headline figures, you're taking a kind of educated guess on what those figures might be. And then if there's any abnormals that you think, well, that's just something that I cannot put a figure on it at this time because I need to err on the side of caution. Then that's highlighted that, okay, I need to spend a wee bit of time diving a wee bit deeper into that specific problem and trying to find a realistic cost to put in my cash flow and my budget.
Do you have a rough range you'd be able to share for people's interest to say, okay, well, if we're thinking about a new build house, to go from plain ground up, you got to take into account everything from the utilities, the entrance and access, would you do it to the finished product?
I kind of work it a wee bit different. I don't think there's any right or wrong answer, but I kind of work it that I've got a cost for like the raw build, so the foundation's up, yeah, and that gives me a kind of finished house. And then I've got other columns for what my services costs be.
Yeah.
You know, what are my externals, gardens, driveways? I put costs in for that. So I kind of break it down a wee bit, but my cost that I allow for, you know, foundations, up, roof, kitchens, bathrooms, and finished is roughly about £950 a square metre. Yeah.
That sounds like great value.
Well, it is, but I think the thing that a lot of people forget about is all the other costs that can go in, you know, to a development. And
yeah,
I mean, the one I'm working on just now is you're probably looking at, including the purchase of the land, over £100,000 of costs up front, you know, before you even dig a spade.
Yeah.
So, and I guess that's the other thing as well, is knowing that, okay, I bought the land. Well, that's great, but you've still got maybe another 40 or 50 or 60,000 pounds or whatever it is to put in the pot before you can even, you know, put a shovel in the ground.
Yeah. So developers often refer to it as soft costs, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
What would you allocate as a proportion of the? Okay, we've got the end value. We'll take off a proportion for the build. What percentage of the GDV might you allocate to soft costs?
I tend not to work that way, is the honest answer. And maybe other developers do, but I tend to break it down element by element and treat every project separately.
Yeah.
So I don't try and do the pie chart thing, you know, where I'm saying that's that and that's that. I try and take an educated guess on all of it at preliminary stages, because there could be something peculiar about a site that throws too high a proportion against one element that you've just not included. Yeah. And so I tend not to do that, and I tend to teach not to do that as well. You know, I think it's important that if you want to become a developer, of course you're going to make mistakes. I mean, I've been doing this for 20 years, and every project, whether it's one of mine or whether it's one of my clients, there's just something that always comes along the way. You go, God, why did nobody see that coming? You know, just.
What's your, from those learns, what's your approach to looking to mitigate that? Is it building in a certain contingency in it, and at what kind of magnitude and level is that?
In all of my appraisals, I put in a contingency figure of about 5%.
Okay.
9 times out of 10, it's taking the building of the projects out of the ground. That's where the costs can run away with themselves. You know, so deeper foundations for whatever reason. You know, for example, one of the developments that we bought was for 12 units. Now, I'd done a site investigation report on that development 10 years or so ago, 15 years ago, but it was out of date. So when we bought these 12 plots, building control, as we knew, asked for a new site investigation report. So we did, I think it was 3 boreholes within the 12 plots, one at each end and one in the middle of the 12 plots. They were pretty much forming a crescent, a street. And the first 4 plots, it was found, were sitting on top of an ad hoc peat bog right below the ground. So there was about, I think it was about half a metre of peat, something like that anyway. So that meant that you basically had to pile those 4 houses. So piling's when you actually drive the piles down below, so they're sitting on the bedrock, which means the houses can't settle. Now, the chances are that if that bore was not done, you know, because of the site investigation report was old and dated, if that house had been built 10 years ago, you know, that would have been built on top of that peat. No, it may not have sank, but it could have.
But it may have done.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's interesting. Do you believe it's possible for a relative newbie but enthusiastic investor to pivot from your buy-to-let and HMO type investments into becoming a developer? Could they apply some, I guess, back of the napkin kind of approach to do the first level of diligence before they're obviously not going to put an offer in based on this, but to give them a sense of, right, there's an opportunity I'd like to explore further. So my first round of analysis is going to be to do this rough sum so that it tells me, yes, Sen, explore it further with the help of someone like Kenny or someone else, or no, pass on that, go and look at the next opportunity. Would you say it's fair that a relative newbie could apply a formula of sorts to be able to do that first round of diligence?
Yes, I think so, and I think it's important that we teach developers or young, not novice, intermediate as well developers who are moving from one scale up to the next, is that we teach them how to do this process as best as can be done. It's something that I'm now coaching or mentoring in. It's not so much I've got this thing. It kind of irks me when gurus, if you use that word, turn around and promote that the money's made in the deal. So you went out, you've paid 50 grand for the deal, and it's a piece of ground and blah 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 blah, and there's 150 or 200 grand profit in it, and also job done, isn't it? Well, no, you still got to deliver it. You don't have any profit in your bank. You still got to deliver it. And I'm trying to educate and teach through the architecture practice and through my kind of mentoring course as well, that this is what I want to teach is that how do you lock the profit in? And sometimes you don't. It's all right saying, I'll teach you how to lock the profit in. We're teaching, methodologies and steps and processes, but things go wrong. Things can go wrong. And at the end of the day, until you hand over that building and walk away and the effective exit strategy is executed, the profit will become the profit at the back end. I would defy any developer out there who has to turn around and say that they've never had projects that have failed that for whatever reason, they've not made as much money in them as they wanted, etc., etc. They're no different from the entrepreneurs, the Dragon's Den people who invest in 10 businesses and only 3 of them make it.
I'm conscious. I've got a number of questions still to read out, but I'm asking stuff that I think I'm interested in. I think other people would be interested as well. So I guess the final one on that Mike asked about finding the land, valuing the land. Okay, there's a calculation that goes into working backwards. It's case by case. I guess when you strip out your profit and your build cost and the associated costs to get out the ground, etc., you're left with a budget to allocate. Say, well, that's what I'm willing to pay for it. So that's that. But the question I had coming naturally on from what you said about the profit is what it'll be at the end. Developers will face challenges. What, Kenny, gives you the confidence to move forwards with a deal, with a project, when the end outcome is to sell a load of finished houses, but you don't have those buyers queued up waiting for it? That's a degree of uncertainty, isn't it? You need to find the buyers during the build process with marketing and after, etc. So if you don't know who's going to own the houses before you start, what is it that gives you and your team confidence to pull the trigger and say, yeah, I'm going to develop houses here because I know they're going to sell for at least this much based on that reason, that reason, that reason?
Well, there's various things. You can do your comparables, obviously, at the start when you're doing your due diligence of what has sold for whatever recently in the area. That's something you can give your confidence on. Most of the sites that I've been involved in personally, there's been developers in and around working, who are selling houses. So go in, chap on the doors. Don't necessarily need to tell them who you are, but go in and get the sales brochures and find out what they're selling. What house type are they selling and what they're selling it for. That's an old trick. There's nothing new in that. And the other thing you can do, of course, is you can get your estate agent to put it on the market coming soon. So you're not necessarily selling the houses, you're not even taking reservations on them, but you're starting to test the market, put it on the market for 3 or 4 weeks, see what kind of inquiries, interest to get back, and go from there.
Is that something you would do before you transact on the land? Or
I wouldn't take it to market as soon as I owned the land, or after I owned the land, I would potentially take it to market. But yeah, before you own the land, do your research for local prices and walk into local estates or builders. If it's a housing estate anyway, just walk in. There's always the big boys are always developing nearby. And I don't believe this philosophy that just because the big boys are charging that price, that the smaller developers can't get that same price. I just think that's nonsense. Nonsense. The fact that I know it's nonsense.
Okay, I must respect your time and push on to some of the other questions. So Sarah's got some good ones here. She's asked, what are the top 3 things that you've possibly learned by making mistakes?
By making mistakes? I don't know if making mistakes is necessarily what I want to think. Well, one of the things I would say is but joint venturing. Yeah, so I joint ventured on some of our property developments with two other guys. I got on great with them, etc. But the thing you need to understand when you joint venture with people is just because you have a view on how things should happen doesn't mean to say that you're going to get your way. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you've always got to be mindful that whoever you're joint venturing with still has a view on, even if it's not necessarily within their roles or responsibilities. If someone's looking after the money, they still might have a view on how things should procure on site in terms of construction and all that kind of stuff. So I think that's one of the things that I've learned from because I was always a sole director in my businesses and made the decisions I needed to make. But as soon as I got into property development, that was a different thing. Yeah. So if you're out there thinking about joint venturing, then that's one of the things I would say is one of my key learnings. It's not a mistake; it's just something that I've learned.
So how would you package that up into maybe a takeaway line that someone could write on a sticky note if they wanted to? Something to learn from your experience going into a joint venture. What is the thing, the question they need to take out of hearing what you've said?
The thing they should do is go for a pint with them. I don't know if it's the thing, but the thing they should do is go for a pint with them, have a couple of pints, and when everybody's feeling a bit relaxed and okay, then you get to know. Then you get to know the true person. So yeah.
Rapport and trust. I once heard that the fastest and most effective form of building rapport is connecting with someone on a level of values. So identifying what probably people who watch this may have well read or heard about John DeMartini. He talks about the values factor, but when you connect on a level of values, then it can build rapport very, very quickly. You know what it's like if you meet someone for the first time and they talk about something that is on your mind all the time, property development, what have you, you can chat for ages. Yeah. Whereas if they want to talk about, let's say they're really into football and you're really not into football, it's like, oh, you lost me at hello there. It was
that's it. Yeah.
No.
And it's also skill sets because, you may be getting into a joint venture relationship though with, let me think, try the best way to describe this. You may be getting into a joint venture relationship with someone who has no knowledge of property, but for example has knowledge of managing money, has the money and knows how to run businesses, so that's a good skill set to bring to the table. So
absolutely.
So I think getting to know your JV partners is absolutely fundamental key, and ultimately you don't really get to know them until you start working with them. I mean, you probably found the same with Chris. You met him, you liked him. I know a wee bit of your story, but it's not until you kind of get maybe a year or 2 years into the relationship, particularly if you think it's going to be a long-term relationship, that you really get to know and understand them. You get to know about the family issues and, where they're going on holiday and all that kind of stuff that starts to form a bond,
Yeah.
I
Anything
think
else that's come up from, we're not saying, you've had massive career affecting mistakes or anything, but I guess just things that you learn as you fumble through doing the first development, the second development, that you think, right, now I know how to go faster.
Yeah, for me, I don't think it's about going faster. I think the second thing I would say, I think you and I have had a conversation about this before, is building houses, no matter what experience you've got, is hard work, and it's stressful. And I sit now 4 years later and I look back and I go, right, what has that achieved? Now, I'm not sitting here saying that, I'm not one of these guys sitting saying, no, I'm a millionaire, because I'm not, and come and I'll teach you how to be a millionaire doing property development, because that's not what I'm about. I'm just trying to teach people how to put certain steps and processes in place. But the thing that I've learned about trying to build, or having built just sort of 60 houses or so, is that, you take that, you sell it and you give it away to someone, and any opportunity that you had to keep the income, the recurring property income, has gone, So a focus for me then over the next, from now on, is how do I procure assets, either build them or refurbish them or do whatever I want to do, and then keep them. So it's build to rent or build to SA or whatever you want to call it. But I'm looking now as, right, okay, I do my drawings. I'm happy doing the architecture drawings, but as soon as they're done, I'm finding another client. Yeah. As soon as I build a house for someone, I've sold it, I need to build another one. So you're constantly in that retail zone of do one, start another one. And I'd quite like to just flip that and say, do you know what? I'm going to build, refurbish, and keep, and then cash flow. That's
makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. So that's what I'm interested in, and I think a lot of people get into property because they see the big lumps of cash that could be made. And I'm kind of flipping my thinking, well, is it about the big lumps of cash, or is it about being in a position whereby you truly don't need to get up the next day? Because, if it costs you £5,000 a month, for example, to be financially free, 3, 4, 5 SAs, service accommodation units, with good occupancy, can generate that money for you. So if you're going to build 5 houses, build 5 SA. So that's the way my brain's thinking now.
I like it. I think that'll resonate with a lot of people.
Yeah.
Okay, we were talking before about working with an architect if you're the developer. These couple of questions have come up. Maybe I'll ask them both together so you can answer them together. What should an investor developer look for in an architect? So that's complemented with probably what are the top 3 to 5 things to ask an architect when looking to instruct and work with one, perhaps even for the first time. So we're talking about here an investor looking to find and qualify the architect that they want to work with on maybe their first development. How do they find that architect, and what questions or what things should they be looking for in the architect for that, I guess,
right,
proof of, yeah, that's the person I want to work with?
There's potentially loads of answers to that one, I think. So it would depend on if it's a kind of novice, developer, don't do it based on price. It's value. I had a young guy come into my office and started to try and, hadn't done anything, took an hour of my time, and then tried to pitch me on the fee, and then said, oh, and by the way, I'm not going to pay you until after the building warrant's approved. And I thought, well, I'm not, I'm the architect. I'm not taking the risk for your development. That's your job. So I think you've got to be, when you're looking for your architect, be mindful when you get in to meet them that you're looking for value and not just the transactional price, although the transactional price is important. So how do you find your architect? I would say through referrals, word of mouth. You want to find an architect who has got testimonials, who's prepared to introduce you to some of their clients. That could be an email introduction or a phone call for references. I've been asked that quite often, and I've got some clients that I can refer in for references. I would also say, if you've got an architect who's looking, and you're looking to do a project with them, try and get maybe the addresses of some buildings or projects they've done in the past, and go and see them. Yeah. Maybe chat the door of the person or persons who are living in the house, or what have you. Have a wee, if you can find the person that's commissioned it, have a wee chat with them just to see what they think. Grant Cardone does that actually, doesn't he? When it just came into my head there, when he's out and about in America and he's looking to buy, he buys 400 and 500 houses at the one time. He'll just roll up in his car and pull the window down and start asking people, do you like living here? What do you like about it? Because he's trying to get a feel for what people think about the properties before he buys them. So, if you're looking to appoint an architect, you could, meet somebody in the street, or in the building, what's it like to work in here, etc., and try and get a feel for how people are responding to the building, because that could be a good clue as to whether the architect truly understands the brief. What else?
When you said go for value rather than price, how is it that you might quantify or assess value when having this initial kind of beauty parade with, say, 2-3 different architects, when the investor developers think about, all right, I'm looking for value from this relationship. What are going to be the measures of value? How should they, going about it for the first time, understand, all right, I can see this is going to be really great value working with this person?
Well, a few of the things go back to the kind of old-fashioned cost, time, and quality. Yeah. So, and then communication, which is probably a big one. So communication, we'll start with that one first. You'll probably tell from initial meetings how well your architect, or how good he is or she is at communicating. If you send an email in or make a phone call, don't get a hold of them. I need to meet Kenny because he's been introduced to me. I'm usually on the phone that day. Next day, worst case scenario, trying to pick up contact with prospective new client. If you're waiting a week for a phone call or an email back, that just is someone who's maybe too busy or just isn't interested. So you want to try and that's a good clue as to the kind of communications, or how willing the architect is to respond. Because when it comes to actually being involved in the design team, there's nothing worse than sending emails, because a lot of our job now is sending emails and waiting for responses. Yeah. There's nothing worse than waiting far too long for it. It just slows the whole process down. So communication is one of the important things. And then going back to cost, I don't necessarily mean the cost of the architect's services, but it's more what you're getting for the cost. For example, it might be that I'm £3,000-4,000 more expensive than the next guy, but I'm throwing in a 3D model that you can use to market the project. It's going to make it easier to get through planning. It's going to make it easier to sell. It's going to make it easier for you to show your mum and dad, know your family members what you're up to, and know your JV investors and all that stuff. So there's value in that as well. And in terms of time, you want your architect to be responding quickly. We kind of touched that with communication, but you also want your architect to understand that there is time constraints on the project. So if you're having those conversations with the architect, you'll get a feel for the architect understanding that there is a sense of, not urgency, but importance that's set against time. And then quality, you're out and about, you're looking at the quality of the buildings that they're doing. If the architect is involved in the construction work, then you'll be looking at the architect's ability to deliver the quality of build on site. Sometimes as an architect, we're not involved on site works. I mean, I've designed some buildings and driven past and went, that's not how that was supposed to be.
Mm-hmm.
So there's elements of that as well.
I think, yeah, there's some real gold in amongst that people appreciate hearing. That's cool. One other one here that came in from a friend of mine, Paul, who's actually looking to work with an architect. Now, they are based in Wales, but they're looking to pivot or add to the buy-to-let stuff and start doing more development projects. Their question would be, maybe directly, would you help with guidance on, I guess, being more of a power team member like that? Or if not, who might you be able to refer them to have someone that's almost part of their team rather than a one-off kind of transactional conversation on a deal-by-deal basis? If they want to be able to have a relationship with an architect, pick up the phone, sound out deal opportunities with them, I guess there's one question: does your friend Kenny do that? And if not, who might be able to recommend? Or then we're back to, I guess, finding others in the Wales area.
Yeah, I dare say there are architects out there who will do some kind of JV, you know, or a certain amount of work at risk. Yeah, I tend not to do a lot of work at risk because, to be honest with you, I'm busy and I don't need to. But there's also other. I mean, you've got construction professionals out there who tend to maybe be QS based. Project managers who will happily, you know, go for coffees and provides a certain amount of information up front or for free to keep the, you know, relationships going. There are also, you know, mentors out there who have got, to varying degrees, experience that you can tap into as well. I don't know if that's
okay. So for this chap in, if you were putting yourself in the shoes of the investor in Wales, going from not having had to use an architect before because it's standard by internal refurbish and then let out, and you're going to start looking at buildings that you have to move around and add stuff to, where would you start to find your architect?
Well, I would certainly start locally and try and find an architect locally. Architects, I mean, I can work in England and Wales, I'm qualified to do so, but I don't because the regulations are quite specific. I always say the devil's in the details. So whilst I know generically, you know, what it is to put a building up, you know, I don't know the specific regulations in England and Wales. I know the specific regulations and processes for planning building control in Scotland. So I think you'd probably be best to find someone local if you're looking for that degree of knowledge. Find someone who's got experience in the type of developments you're trying to do as well. And some of the other questions we've already kind of filtered or answered that, you know, how do you pick an architect and all that kind of stuff. But I mean, architects generally are, like most professionals, give away too much information. That's for it, you know. Unless you're a solicitor. The last time I needed to try and involve a solicitor in England, it was £1,000 just for him to look at a letter. Whereas in Scotland, believe it or not, it was I send us a letter through and we'll have a quick look at it. So no offence to the solicitors in England, but just different ways of working, of doing things. So yeah, if there's an architect out there that you can get in tow with and what have you, then do that. What I wouldn't say though is don't befriend an architect, you know, sponge them for information for 6 months, and then when you get a development, say, right, I'm going out for 3 quotes. I mean, that's not the kind of thing you do, you know.
No.
Yeah. So
on the flip side of that, then would it be sensible to then bring the architect into the deal in some way? So rather than being I guess, a fee customer-client relationship, so professional service provider and a client relationship, should it more be a case of, all right, well, let's work with our architect and find projects together where I guess part of their skin in the game is the architect services?
Yeah, there's absolutely no harm in doing that. You can work with architects, you know, you can work on finder's fees as well. So if the architect finds a site that they get a fee, all that stuff's fine as long as it's declared up front that that's what's happening. Your architect could GV. Why would you GV with an architect though? I know you get the experience thing, but technically speaking, it's probably cheaper just to pay them a fee than it is to give them equity in the deal. So you would maybe only, JV with an architect potentially when you don't have sufficient funds, and you're trying to minimise your expense. Ultimately, you give away more of the equity at the end of the day because that's the nature of how it would work. So I think it's just a question for the architect.
Yeah.
I remember being in training courses down south, and I met a few architects, and they did say that they've done that a few times. Yeah.
Yeah. Again, it comes back to where you started the whole thing, which was the groundwork at the front end. Have a couple of pints, have the chat, and figure out.
Yeah, I think there's nothing better than just getting to know someone and seeing, what motivates them. It might be the architect's just so super motivated because they just want to do a project like that. I just want to do one, so I'll do whatever it is I've got to do to make it work.
Awesome. I heard you mention a couple of times in there that you're involved in delivering some training, coaching, mentoring. Is that via a specific bespoke course, or is it an ongoing kind of mentorship program? How is it that you deliver that?
Well, throughout this COVID-19 situation, I have been busy doing architecture stuff, but a few years ago I wrote a course on how you go about the mechanics of delivering a property, a development project. And so over the last 6, 7, 8 weeks, I've been working with an American company to market that and also to put it online. So it's just about to go online. The marketing started, but I'm literally doing the recordings of each stage of the process and doing the learnings and uploading and doing all that stuff just now. So it's really geared towards helping people who because some people don't want to go to a 2-3 day long sit in a room with 60 people thing, and maybe a week or 2 weeks later forget, because there's no follow-up support or what have you, unless they're doing maybe a mastermind. So my view on it is if I can put something online, they can work through it at their own pace. It's a chronological, step-by-step process, and there's support at the back end via myself and some other professionals that they can send in emails, put ticket requests in, and we can start to help them and coach them and get them through the process of how do you deliver a project, and I think that's, as I say, I think that's one of the most fundamental things that I've seen in my architecture career is projects that's failed because they've got the money, they've got the determination to do it, but they just don't have the skill set or the knowledge. And it's okay, I'll Google it, but Google doesn't tell you. Google, you just read it. Nobody's actually telling you that's not right. Do this, do this. Yeah. So that for me, that's quite important, and that's just about to go live. Yeah.
So that's exciting. So a brand new course online for people to sit at home and digest in their own time. And this is, you said, okay, it's not like a 2-3 day thing. So I guess how is it delivered? Is it drip fed over a period of weeks? It's all there and you kind of self-serve and gorge on it?
It's self-serve. You basically start at the beginning, and as you complete each section, you move on to the next section. Yeah. And you can go back. You can go back. You just can't go forward too quick. And part and parcel of the whole course as well is appraising the numbers. So there's a document that I use, nothing sophisticated. It's an Excel spreadsheet, and we teach people how to fill in the blanks. Yeah.
Okay.
So that's what we do.
And if you were to kind of capture in a line or two what the result is that someone could expect of putting themselves through that course and diligently taking on board the content, what's the end result of sitting through your course that someone could expect?
Well, the end result is that it really focuses around about this sheet, this development appraisal sheet. So by the end of it, I really want the developer to know what it is to appraise a site. Yeah, so that's the primary focus. But there's 6 sections within that sheet, or that appraisal sheet, and we really dive deep into, for example, so this is much more long-winded than you've asked me for, but so for example, building control. What is building control? We can, I can direct someone to where they can find what the building control fees are, but they don't understand what building control is all about, and the processes and the timescales and the procedures and all that kind of stuff. So the training goes into the depths, all the different sections. We do a kind of deep dive into the various sections of what to expect, who do you ask for, what kind of reports do you need, what's the costs involved in the reports, how do you find the costs involved in the reports, how do you get costs, how do you find the professionals. It just goes on and on and on and on and on. So it's really designed to do that. And then, it's the type of thing that, I mean, you're big into masterminds, yeah. You've done a few masterminds, and we'll talk shortly about masterminds, because I know that you want to. Oh, actually, my table's just coming off there. There's a lot of things that I feel that you can. There's a lot of things that you can do with property development. And masterminds are great. I used to run this. That's where I was going with this. I used to run this as a mastermind weekend course, yeah. And at the end of it, each person had half an hour or 20 minutes or so to bring to the table a project or a specific challenge that they had with a project, and we'd chat about it around the table. And it was quite effective when you had not just an architect, but you had an accountant, you had a solicitor, you had IT guys, and everybody looks at that challenge from a different perspective, yeah, and brings their knowledge or their skills to the problem. So the solicitor right away is thinking about the legal challenges, and the accountant's thinking about the tax implications and all that kind of stuff. And that's the thing that I liked about the mastermind. But I just felt that before anybody even got to that stage, they just needed to understand the kind of basics, the fundamentals, to get to that level. And so that's really the backdrop for why the course has been written.
Got you. So this is it goes way upstream, back to the grassroots. Let's get these fundamentals right to allow you to then move forward with more confidence.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. Cool.
I think masterminds have their place, but right now, for where I want to be teaching people, it's not at mastermind level. You're big into masterminds. You've done a few masterminds, yeah?
Yeah, I have been involved in masterminds, and I have ran and actively kind of mentor through masterminds right now, and have been doing so for the last couple of years, but was first exposed to masterminds back in about 2014 due to being part of a group of software entrepreneurs. I left the job and was starting to look at developing a business online, and so got into it with a group of American mentors, and that was all virtual. It was done over Zoom and Skype, but it's been part of my life since 2014, and then it transitioned into me actually holding them and mentoring through masterminds myself, as I said, for over a couple of years now, and I absolutely love them. It's something that is, I think it plays to my set of highest values and how I want to continue to grow and stretch myself, but more importantly, how I want to help serve others. And you touched on it before when you said about the different perspectives. The thing I love about the mastermind groups is this collective intelligence that you're able to tap into. And because people come to a table, whether it's virtual or around a physical table, they come with vast amounts of life experience, business experience, property experience, different emotional intelligence, different perspectives on how to break something down and build it back up together. It creates this, I guess, additional brain, this higher level of thinking and intelligence that you just can't tap into with just yourself trying to brainstorm or yourself plus one other, where your conversation is kind of isolated to the two of you. So it's that additional kind of person plus brings this incredible, let's say higher level of thinking and creativity and group problem solving. Generally, what I've been able to, I guess, morph into is someone who looks to expertly facilitate these ahas and breakthroughs around a group of people working together at a variety of different levels. Because generally people will come to a group either with an opportunity that they need to add fuel to the fire of, or a problem or an obstacle they need to solve and get around so that they can move forwards. And it's working with a group to help make that magic happen is incredibly satisfying. And the group learning that comes from it is incredibly powerful. There's nothing like it that I've experienced. And this is where, I inject a lot of my time and have a lot of fun doing. So
yeah.
that's...
So did I hear you say that you're running masterminds just now, or you're about to run a mastermind?
Yeah. No, I'm actively involved in, as an independent, I guess, freelancer, if you will, but experienced person, hired in help, so to speak. I run masterminds for another organization, right. And I'm working with several hundred delegates that I will essentially oversee their development over a period of typically 12 months, taking them from, it could be anything from starting from scratch or those coming in with already 50 properties under the belt, but it's about taking their individual property journeys from a standing start, haven't been on a mastermind program before, to then tailoring their journey towards their goal. It might be to get their first 2 properties, or it might be to get from 50 to 70, because it's a facilitation process. And I absolutely love doing that. And the power of, I guess, doing it frequently, as in meeting with a group every month, and now I'm also doing it virtually weekly, is I'm very good at being able to draw out some key, I guess, ingredients that help get shiitake done, if you will. There's things behind goal achievement that I really look to draw out of people, so that whilst they have this great goal and great vision, there's obviously going to be a process and a system behind sticking to that process that's going to allow them to achieve the big goal.
Right.
And that's what I'm very good at getting people to focus on and helping them achieve, with this extra layer of accountability and the group knowledge. And that's where the combination of those factors together, the inspiration, the social proof of what your neighbor is doing, the problem solving, the opportunity, adding fuel to the fire, layered in with this kind of the key ingredients that I put on top of it, of specific process-led goals and accountability, it delivers great results, and it's an enjoyable journey to be on. Remember, I said at the beginning, I was building my property portfolio on my own for 10 odd years in the early days, and it was so lonely and so isolated, and you're second guessing yourself because you don't have anyone else to speak to about it. But being, I guess, part of a mastermind group brings so many other additional benefits above and beyond the day where you're sat with people around the table each month. So there's that. And then obviously the big vision that Chris and I have is to be building our own incredible properties, villas, chalets, ski resort, mountainside, the hill, sea view villa in the Mediterranean, wherever it may be, right, to hold powerful mastermind retreats. I mean, that's where our vision's been since 2016, when we first started on our mentorship program, because it combines a lot of our own highest values. So that's something that that we're working towards and enjoying each step of the way.
So do you think that, because obviously I've been involved with an organisation and did a bit of mentoring with them, coaching, call it what you want, education, consultancy. So I always felt that when I did that I actually probably got more out of it sometimes than the mentee, because there's definitely key learnings that you can take away when you're teaching or coaching. So how do the masterminds that you run or participate in affect your or influence your property investing philosophy now?
How has it influenced my philosophy? Funnily enough, the biggest influence of my philosophy has been from masterminds outside of property.
Right.
Because it's a way of thinking. The things that, so I'll partake in mastermind groups at kind of like a peer level, and then I will host and lead mastermind groups for people who, well, they may be at a peer level or above, they may be a couple of steps behind, but it's more about facilitating something that's going to accelerate their journey. So yes, I'm always learning bits from what people are working on that might spell a new idea for me. The biggest thing is, in some ways, it can be a bit selfish. You probably heard before that when one person teaches, two people learn. It keeps me sharp. It keeps me at the front of my game in terms of the stuff that I choose to specialize in. Because when I do have a technical question that someone asks me, I can walk through that and answer for that person. And if I can't answer technically, I'll be able to guide them on how to get the answer. But the biggest thing is actively doing it, is constantly, I guess, honing and refining my own art and science of delivering powerful masterminds. So that's kind of one thing. And it's reinforced that I love doing this. I love seeing breakthroughs in people and helping them get to their next step and facilitate a light bulb moment in their own head. So that's one thing in, I guess, philosophy wise. I know I want to do this long term, and it fits into the bigger picture of that I explained, these mastermind retreats in lovely locations. So that's shaped the thinking. But say again?
Sounds exotic.
It could be exotic, but the one that you refer to about what have I taken from maybe masterminds that have influenced my property philosophy, that came about actually from an approach to business that I learned from mentors who were teaching how to start a software business. And it was all about this methodology of starting with the customer and the result that customer wants, and then working backwards from, well, what's the mechanism that's going to deliver that result for that customer? Because that was how we were taught to start your first little software business. And I did that years ago. I just fell out of love with software as a business. I fell in love with the model of it. I like the idea you build something, like you said, and you get income from the license of the software model. But actually building a software business was completely incongruent with my areas of genius and what I like doing and the activities I enjoy doing. It was completely against that. So I fought for 2 years with that process, but learned a heck of a lot from it. So applying that to property now, the whole philosophy that Chris and I take to property is, whilst in the early years I used to buy property that looked cheap, now I will only invest in property deals and opportunities that are clearly reverse engineered from the exit point, the end outcome. In other words, the customer and the problem that this property is solving for the customer. So I see things very, very differently now. It's reverse engineered from a very validated reason, and even as far as if I can pre-sell that solution before I've invested, now we're talking. Now that's my criteria checked off, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, that reminds me of when we met back in January at the networking event.
Yeah.
You were speaking about, you've written a book.
Yeah.
And I've read the book. I actually won on that night. I don't know if you can see it here. It's called Predictable Property Profits. And within the book, excellent read, by the way. Within the book and on the night, I remember you mentioning about the kind of pivot that you went through, particularly with the SA business and understanding your client, the end client. So that kind of resonates with what you've just said there, doesn't it?
Completely. Yeah. It's that approach of removing the guesswork. That's what the book's about. It's removing the guesswork from what you're doing, the deal or the business, because this principle applies to absolutely everything. You can remove the guesswork and get more certainty in a property deal, but you could also do it in your first business offering, whether it's a service or a product. It's about understanding the end result the customer wants, figuring out how to deliver it for them, and essentially getting their commitment to buy your solution to that problem before you go out and invest in making it happen.
Yeah.
Because way too many of us think that, well, I'm going to go and invent this new Hoover because that's what the world needs. And you get a great designer and inventor to make this Hoover, and unless you're Dyson, it might just completely fall flat because they haven't understood the end customer and the result the end customer wants. They're just a great inventor of machinery and stuff, and it may take off, it may not. Yes, the world needs visionaries to create new trends, but what I'm talking about in the book is taking guesswork out of the equation. I refer to guesswork being the most dangerous word in business. Mm-hmm. And so it's all about the methodology to remove that danger and get more certainty in your property deals. And it can apply to SA, it can apply to residential, it can apply to development, it can apply to commercial, and then anything else in the world out there. So that's the big philosophy that is front and center of what we do.
Great, excellent. So if I was interested in getting a copy of your book and sending it off to a few of my mentees, etc., how would I get my hands on it?
Quite simply, it's there on Amazon. It's up on Amazon.co.uk, Predictable Property Profits. You'll find it and get to read some of the reviews from people who bought the book on Amazon.
Great, fantastic, lovely. I take it you're delighted with the results of the book so far, yeah?
From what perspective?
The interest in the book.
Oh yeah. I mean, I've been overwhelmed with messages that have been sent to me of people who've read the book and how it's changing their complete approach to. I'll tell you one interesting one. There's one of the ladies that is in the mastermind group that I will help run and manage. She read the book and straight away applied the principles to her greeting card business. So she's an artist and she makes these beautiful hand-painted cards. Mm-hmm. And after having read my book, she thought, oh, right, this concept of pre-selling he's talking about, that sounds interesting. Mm-hmm. She took a couple of her designs, went to a pretty significant gift card shop it's an independent one, but in a local area, and said, look, here's some of the things that I do. I could make some specific painted images of this coastal area for you to sell in this shop. Would that be of interest? Saw the artwork, high quality. Yeah, that'd be fantastic. There and then in the shop, got a pre-sale for an order of however many tens of her cards. So she took that one concept and turned her business around to do business with no risk. She didn't put the time into creating the cards until she had the order, if that makes sense. Yeah. So that kind of feedback is incredible. That's changing people's lives. And now when they can go and do that and apply it to serviced accommodation, for example, it might save a massive costly mistake, which is why I made the costly mistake, and I wrote about it in the book, and I don't want other people to make that mistake. So just like you're trying to help people make sure that they safely analyze development opportunity before they get into it, I want to make sure people safely analyze their property deals as well before they get into it and de-risk it, remove the guesswork. So yeah.
Great, fantastic, Sam, fantastic.
We've covered a lot, haven't we?
Yeah, it's been a good catch up. It's probably been longer than we thought, actually, to be honest with you, but it has been absolutely great to catch up with you.
Kenny, for people getting onto your course, how are people going to find out about it and get more information on inquiring and potentially signing up to it?
Well, there is a web page that they can go to. I'll drop the link in this one. We'll obviously put this recording and put it live on YouTube, so I will drop the link in the comments. But it's www.kmpropertymentor.co.uk and then /free. That will take them to a web page where they can download some hints and tips. I think it's an 8-page document, an architect's guide to property development, and then they'll follow through a process just to book a call with me, and we can have a chat about development and whether the course is right for them. Because I don't want to work with people. This isn't I sell it to everyone and anyone. I really do only want to work with people who I feel the course is right for. And so we'll go through a kind of qualification call just to make sure that that is the case. Yep.
Cool. Sounds good.
Yeah, similarly, saying your book, I will also get the link for that of Amazon. Is that something you can share with us, or is it full of dots and I's and T's and numbers?
Well, for the Amazon link, yeah, it's easiest probably just going on to Amazon and just typing in the Amazon search bar, predictable property profits. It's also worth mentioning what I'm going to do actually in kind of celebration of the launch of the book, which had literally just come out at the very end of last year. I've put together a competition where people can actually win a stack of 7, in my opinion, life-changing books, some of the books I read in early years. So I've got a competition available for people to, for free, enter and win a stack of books. My book will be one of them, obviously, and give me a bit of an opportunity to, I guess, spread the good word that I've written this book. It's out there in the open now. You've got a chance to get it for free. If you don't win it, then you can always get it on Amazon. But that's going to come out as well. So I'll have a link for that I can put in to join this as well.
Fantastic. And also, you send out every week, isn't it? An email to you've got a contact database. You send an email out. Is it usually a Sunday night? I think.
Yeah. I'm normally.
So how do people get access to that weekly email?
So to sign up to it, there's 2 different, I guess, routes to it. There's a link on our training kind of mentoring type business website, which is Devenir Plus, DEVENIR plus plus.co.uk, and there'll be a link to where to sign up to the newsletter on that, or on the other website we have where my blog normally sits, which is aderoproperty.com. So that's ADAERO property, like TY.com, and that's where all my blog posts sit. And there's a little box to fill in to get the weekly newsletter, which includes my main post I write, plus I curate 3 additional articles every week that I believe is going to add value to property investors. So it's normally got things to do with news, insights, resources, ideas, and normally something to do with personal development as well. And that can hit your inbox straight away on a Sunday night to digest at your leisure across the week.
Yeah, great, excellent. No, I do read them when they come through, so there's always great hints, tips and suggestions in them. So yeah, well done for doing that. Well done. Cool. Fantastic. Shane, I've thoroughly enjoyed our time.
Likewise, yeah.
Yeah, it's been great to catch up with you, and it's great to see what's happened to you over the last 4 years. I know we do follow each other on Facebook, but it's just difficult to keep in contact with everyone, isn't it? So it's been an absolute pleasure to chat with you again, and please do say hello to Chris for me. But I need to, the next time you're through and looking at your project through there, give me a buzz and I'll happily pop along and have a coffee with you.
Definitely. Yeah, that'd be good. We definitely will. Fantastic. Awesome.
Okay,
All right, good chatting to you again. We'll speak to you very soon, I hope.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you for that.
Cheers.
Cheers.